Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we take a look at the world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, coming up today, the State of the Union address in America. U.S. President Barack Obama shared a message of unity, denouncing politics of fear. Neve Ellis of the Jerusalem Post weighs in for the economic perspective. And the Israel Free Loan Association. The NGO provides interest-free loans to tens of thousands of immigrants and other Israelis. We speak with the director. First, let's start with the headlines. Well, Asian stocks mixed on Wednesday, with some major indexes seeing rebounds. Japan's Nikkei jumped almost 2.9%, though China's Shanghai fell 2.4%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng advanced well over 1%. In Europe, markets opened higher. By afternoon trading, London's FTSE jumped 1%. Germany's DAX also climbed 1%. And France's CAC rose nearly 1.5% higher. U.S. Dow futures also signaled a higher open. Well, oil advanced for first time in 8 days as China imports hit a fresh record for December. Chinese crude imports rose to a record 7.82 million barrels in December, up more than 21% from November, this according to official data released on Wednesday. The day earlier, the global benchmark for oil Brent crude rose 20 cents at $31.06 a barrel. Well, the contract fell 69 cents to settle at $30.86 after bottoming at $30.34. Still, the bearish outlook for oil looms for the markets. A U.S. government forecast on Tuesday indicated that global oversupply will swell until late 2017. China's permanent representative to the United Nations said Tuesday that the country will continue to work with the G77. The Chinese ambassador said China and the G77 should strengthen international cooperation on climate change. Liu Jie made these remarks at the official handover ceremony of the chairmanship of the group from South Africa to Thailand at the UN headquarters in New York City.
We must ensure the success of the first meeting of the UN Economic and Social Council Forum, set to take place in April, so as to mobilize resources needed to fully realize the development goals.
An IMF official indicated that the bank is now looking forward to working now with the China-initiated Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Shikhisi Sumi, Assistant Director of the Asia and Pacific Department of the IMF, made these comments at a forum before IMF officials and members of U.S. think tanks in Washington. The inaugurating ceremony of the AIIB will be held in Beijing on January 16th. The institution was formally established in Beijing on December 25th, 2015. And moving closer to home, earlier we were joined for perspective on a unique form of lending taking place here in Israel as the country increasingly looks to alternative banking methods. On set, we are joined now by Joe Rosen, Director of the Israel Free Loan Association. Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Tell us about the mission of your group.
The Israel Free Loan Association is a non-profit organization with the purpose of helping. Originally, it was new immigrants, and during the course of time, we've extended it to what we basically call the working poor in Israel and small businesses. The people who are working, do have an income, cannot make ends meet, and therefore turn to us to get extra help.
Interesting. Well, we have seen in recent years a lot of backlash to the traditional banking system, both here and also in the United States. How have people responded to this initiative?
As far as we are concerned, and from what we have seen, we are providing loans to people who either have exhausted anything that the banks will offer them because they are low income, or are not even given an entrance into the banks to get that. Small businesses, similarly, are a branch that the banks don't like at all. They are high risk, but in many cases they are the source of the financial backing for a family, and without help from organizations like ourselves, they would not manage to keep their head above water.
All right. Well, your company claims a 99.8% loan repayment rate, which seems likely that most banks could envy that. How do you attest for that?
I think there are various points. One is I think that the people who receive loans from us feel a sense of responsibility because they have been given help which they wouldn't get from another source. They respect that. We also have an efficient department that, whilst not being punitive to anybody, but we make it very clear that we would like our money back, because the whole basis of the Israel Free Loan Association is the recycling of the monies. We are a fund of just over $50 million. And this has enabled us to give loans of $220 million, because once money comes in, it goes out again to the next person. So we talk about green money, money that is recycling and being used time and time again. And were we to waive that money, it would mean that we not only have lost that sum of money, but also its potential recycling. So we do take guarantors, which also makes people feel more responsible, because they don't want to put one of their friends into the invidious situation of having to pay for them. And so of the large number of loans that we have given, the figure of defaults is exactly 0.19%.
Well, how do you maintain the free nature, the interest of these loans, interest-free nature of these loans?
The way they are exactly what they are said to be. If a person receives as a private loan, an individual loan, 20,000 shekel, that's exactly the amount that they return. If the question is how do we finance, how do we pay for our overheads and all that, we have various sources that we get donations specifically for that. We give back office services to some large organisations that we take care of the granting of loans that they would like to give and don't have the tools to do it themselves, organisations from abroad. And that is the main way that we finance the thing. The borrower themselves pays back exactly to the shekel what they received.
Well, thank you very much for being with us, Joe Rosen.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
U.S. President Barack Obama delivered his final State of the Union address to the American people Tuesday evening. Staying true to style and politics, he conveyed a message of optimism.
The world seems to be in uproar. An awakening Russia, an unstable and transitioning China, a changing Europe, and a Middle East as entrenched in quagmire as ever. In his final State of the Union address, President Obama touched on all of these issues. And yet, economics, both in the U.S. and around the globe, stole a prominent role in the president's much-anticipated speech. Threats to the global economy are real. Oil plunged below the $30 mark for the first time in 12 years. China, the world's #2 economy, is dealing with the effects of 2 market crashes in the span of a week. And central banks around the world are rushing to print money in a bid to stimulate stagnant markets. But on the local U.S. economy, where the Fed last month bumped up interest rates, the president gushed.
Let me start with the economy and a basic fact. The United States of America, right now, has the strongest, most durable economy in the world.
And though he was optimistic about the state of the domestic economy, the president also meticulously outlined many of the challenges facing his nation: minimum wage, the gender pay gap, education reform, poverty, and affordable health care. Obama also took a swipe at Wall Street greed, an issue which is playing an increasingly prominent role in the Democratic primary, as frontrunner Hillary Clinton and upstart challenger Bernie Sanders do battle over who will better serve the American middle class.
Food stamp recipients did not cause the financial crisis. Recklessness on Wall Street did. Immigrants aren't the principal reason wages haven't gone up. Those decisions are made in the boardrooms that all too often put quarterly earnings over long-term returns. It's sure not the average family watching tonight that avoids paying taxes through offshore accounts.
Obama's economic messaging was not confined to domestic issues. The president urged Congress to adopt his agenda on the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement aimed at opening markets in East Asia. He also chided the House for its inability to leave the Cold War mentality as it clings to sanctions on Cuba. But when all was said and done, the President of the United States was positive about the future of the country.
That's the America I know. That's the country we love. Clear-eyed, big-hearted, undaunted by challenge, optimistic that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. That's what makes me so hopeful about our future. I believe in change because I believe in you, the American people. And that's why I stand here as confident as I have ever been that the state of our union is strong. Thank you. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
For further analysis, Neve Ellis of the Jerusalem Post joins us for economic analysis. Thank you, as ever, very much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, in President Obama's address, he outlined and mentioned this phrase, the new economy, 4 times. What does he mean by that?
There's no question. You know, this is something that is very clear, I think, to anyone, especially that's in the labor market today, that the economy is changing, right? Especially in the U.S. It's not the economy that was, you know, in the 70s where you could get like a good factory job with great benefits, be part of a really big union that was going to sort of like deck you out and make sure that you had great rights and stay in one place for a very long time. Today, people go from place to place. They change jobs regularly. And the kinds of jobs that people want, the high-paying jobs, aren't those manufacturing jobs as often. They tend to be jobs that are associated with the idea economy, high-tech information. You know, they're really seeing in the United States that the sort of focus is going from Wall Street and finance to high-tech in Silicon Valley. In fact, San Francisco has higher rent prices now for the first time than even Manhattan. And that's just sort of an indication of the way that things and the focus is changing. And what Obama was saying in that speech is that we have to retool ourselves. If this is the economy, you know, then certain things that are built in for the old economy aren't going to work. For example, he mentioned specifically about, you know, your retirement fund. If you have one place that you work your whole life and they have a retirement package that takes care of you, it makes a lot of sense. If you're planning to change jobs every 3 to 5 years, you know, and go from company to company, you need something that's more flexible, where your benefits are going to be able to roll over easily, and that you can still accrue sort of seniority that, you know, you can't right now. So those are the kinds of things that he's talking about. It's an economy that's high-tech, information-based, and globalized.
Right, and it's more fluid.
Absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. Well, he also touted the strength of the domestic economy. So how strong is the U.S. economy at this point?
You know, there are a lot of different ways to measure it. There's no question that the U.S. is still the largest economy in the world. That's unquestionable. You know, if you want to look by growth, you know, even China, which is having, sudden problems with its growth, is still growing very quickly, but that's because it's an emerging market. Among the advanced economies, he's absolutely right that the United States is still doing relatively well. Now, a 2.5% growth rate, you know, is something that's great right now after the recession. It's great in comparison to Europe. It's great in comparison to a lot of, you know, some of the emerging markets that are really flailing right now. But it's still much worse than we would have been used to maybe a decade or 15 years ago. The other thing is that even though he can easily tout, you know, the fact that the unemployment rate has halved from 10% to 5%, which is huge news, the labor participation rate is much lower than it used to be. It's in its lowest level in almost 40 years, which means that even though there are, you know, fewer unemployed people out of those looking for jobs, there are fewer that are even looking for jobs. And that's also translated into things like very low wage growth. So when they're talking about the middle class not feeling it and the low wage workers not feeling the economy, we have all of these great figures that are showing, yeah, the economy is really strong, but people aren't feeling it. That's one of the reasons why. Then again, when you compare it to what's happening in Europe, I'd much rather be in the U.S.
Right. Well, that also still signals the number of people that have just lost hope in their ability to land a job.
Absolutely, and it's sort of an interesting thing to look at if it's people that are dissuaded from looking because they just don't think there is a job out there. But it also, by the way, applies to people that are going and getting skills and being in education. So, you know, the look at the labor force participation rate needs like a more thorough breakdown in order to understand what's really behind it.
Well, also during his address, he urged Congress to pass some of his foreign-facing economic agenda, such as the TPP and also Cuba. How much progress do you expect him to make in this coming year?
I think that one thing that he was very clear-eyed about was the fact that he's not going to have a lot to look to Congress for. Congress is really broken right now. It's very divided, and it's an election year. Now, the TPP is sort of an interesting case because free trade is sort of a traditionally Republican issue, and he's actually getting a lot of blowback from the Democrats. Both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are against it. So it's possible that he'll be able to find a coalition of sort of moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans, but it's up to the Republicans also, whether or not they want to give him a victory like that. So with Cuba, it's similar. The politics are changing on Cuba, and the Latino vote is a very important one. So we might see progress on it, but it's very difficult to say given the political climate in the United States right now.
All right. Well, last word. How would you recap this speech?
I think that Obama is taking this opportunity to say, not just yes, I can, but yes, I did, and to sort of try to shape his legacy. That is the thing that he is trying to do now and say, people, it was never going to be this amazing Messiah from heaven moment, and he's trying to remind people that I did something good.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being with us today, Niamh Ellis of the Jerusalem Post. That concludes our show today. Do stay tuned here every day for all your global economic analysis. I'm Natalie Ehrlich from the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for watching.